Hello my Druids, hello everyone, Zaior here coming back to bring you the best builds and all the content related to the Druid for the new Diablo 4 season called the Divine Intervention. I also want to tell you that we have our Discord server ready for anyone who wants to join it. It is mainly focused on sharing all Druid knowledge of Diablo 4, from optimizing builds to creating new ones. You will also be able to form groups for farm and much more. Also, the first 100 people to join the Discord will be guaranteed a unique role called Founders Circle, a way to recognize those who will kick off this journey in our beloved community. The link will be in the description of the video and also in the description of the YouTube channel. Before continuing with the video, I would really appreciate it if you leave your like, if you like the content, and also subscribe to our channel to grow our incredible community. In this way, we will reach more RPG players in the world, and you will be helping to continue my dream, which is to be able to fully dedicate myself to content creation. Thanks to everyone. Let's start talking about one of the most important things that will come this new season, which is tempering, masterworking, and santification. Since it's the system that received the most changes for the new season, and it's good to review them so they are clear. Okay, let's start with the tempering. The first thing is that now there is the possibility of obtaining a graded affix when tempering. Before tempering only added a normal affix always. Now every time you temper, there is a chance that affix comes out as a graded affix. This means that your item can become much stronger without depending only on the initial drop. Second, we have new resource gain affixes for helmets and rings. They added new affixes of resource gain specifically for helmets and rings. This is especially useful for builds that run out of spirit, rod, essence, etc. Now you can stabilize your resource without depending 100% on the base gear. Third, new resource per second affix for pants. For pants now you can add an affix that regenerates resources per second. Basically, this gives you passive sustain for your abilities without having to attack or use specific mechanics. Fourth adjustment, new recipes to remove useless or duplicated affixes. Blizzard reviewed the recipes and removed affixes that were duplicated between class manuals and generic manuals, removed affixes that were in the game but nobody used, organized the recipes better so that what comes out in each manual makes more sense. In summary, less junk, more consistency. Therefore, tempering is now cleaner, more consistent, and has potential to give us better power spikes with the new graded affixes. Season 11 comes with adjustments that help better control our resources and avoid useless recipes. In summary, more power, less junk RNG. We continue with masterworking. Now the maximum quality increases from 20 to 25. Before you could improve an item up to quality 20. Now the limit is 25, which means more total power in your affixes. Also, each masterwork level now increases between 2 to 5 quality points, before 1 to 3. The progress per upgrade is now bigger, allowing you to reach high quality faster, but also more expensive. Now, each quality point increases all affixes of item by 1%. This is key. Each quality point equals plus 1% in all affixes of the item. More damage, more defense, more multipliers, more utility stats. In total, a fully masterworked item gains 25% extra in all its affixes. Now, completing masterworking level 12 gives us increase of 50% to a random affix when you finish the full masterworking cycle. One of your affixes receives a massive 50% boost. This affix can even be a tempering affix, and the game will show it with a special color to highlight it. This makes the finishing bonus much more impactful than before. Also, the cost of masterworking now scales exponentially. Cost will readjust. The higher your quality, the more expensive it is to advance to the next level. Examples: quality 0, 10 up to sight. Quality 5, 25 up to sight. Quality 15, 66 up to sight. Quality 25, 100 up to sight. The progression is much more demanding at high quality. Material farming will be key for pushes and top builds. In summary, masterworking in Season 11 is stronger than ever. You can take your items to quality 25, increase all affixes 25% extra, and also obtain a 50% boost in affix when completing the process. That said, be ready to invest much more materials because the cost now scaled much more. To finish this path of maximizing our gear, we will do it with the new santification system. Santification is a system that improves the customization and power of your items, allowing certain affixes and powers to reach much higher levels. These are the main changes. Now, graded affixes can also appear on non-ancestral items. Before, only ancestral items could receive graded affix. Now, any item can obtain them during sanctification. More freedom, more builds, fewer limitations. Second, ancestral unique and mythic items can no longer change their affixes. You can replace affixes in ancestral uniques and mythic items. These items remain locked regarding their main stats. Third, the indestructible affix was removed. Instead, now they add +5 to +25 quality ranks. It's a direct buff to item quality instead of a useless affix. Fourth, simplified requirement. Only need power 750 to sanctify. It's no longer necessary for the item to be ancestral. Now it's enough that it has 750 item power or more, in tournament difficulty or higher. Much more accessible for progressing builds. Fifth, global adjustment to affix range. Blizzard did a complete pass. Base values of affixes were increased. Range were removed, less young RNG. Some affixes now have a higher maximum than before, more consistency and more power. Sixth, new legendary powers added to the system. More legendary powers were incorporated, expanding combinations and synergies possible when sanctifying items. More build variety and more depth. In summary, Sanctification in Season 11 makes upgrading items more accessible, more powerful, and less RNG dependent. You can now get graded affixes or more item types. Affix ranges are more consistent, and new legendary powers were added. It's a much more flexible system to take your build to the next level. Let's move forward with the changes made to the Druid, which are not many and also will not change drastically what we had on the PTR. After talking about these changes, I will make a prediction in another video of what for me will be the 3 best builds and the only 3 that you will need to be able to complete all content efficiently and quickly. Okay, let's start with the most important change, which was Grizzly Rage. First, we have a Grizzly Rage that will be more consistent due to the buffs that were made to it. But before continuing with the changes, I want you to confirm for me to not give wrong information. When I was testing Grizzly Rage on PTR, it did not work correctly because the cooldown only counted when it appeared on the skill bar, and that was when the ulti finished. If it is like that and still continues this way, we will still have a Grizzly Rage that works halfway, since we will have a waiting window before being able to use it. But let's continue with the buffs. Its cooldown was reduced from 50 seconds to 35 seconds. I think it needs a lot of explanation, a buff to increase the use of the skill. Also, its duration was increased from 10 seconds to 12 seconds. It's not much, but we gain a few extra seconds. One that is very good, also its damage reduction increased from 20% to 30%. This will help us for the harder content which will be pushing the pit. And finally, the buff given by rank 5 of this skill, which was a 30% more armor, now its cooldown will be reduced another 10 seconds. This means that plus the base cooldown we have 30% or 40% total uptime, but it will vary depending on the build. In summary, we have a Grizzly Rage much better than what we had before and more consistent. Let's continue with the next aspect that directly affects Grizzly Rage, and it's one of the mandatory aspects when it uses it. I'm talking about Rampaging Warvest. Before, it increases the ultimate duration by 10 seconds. Also, each critical hit increases your critical hit damage by 10%, multiplicative stacking up to 200%. Now, critical hits while Grizzly Rage is active increase all your damage by 3%, multiplicatively for 60 seconds, stacking up to 120%. What does this mean? First, we no longer have the ultimate duration increase. This affects a little when we were trying to have 100% uptime of the build, but with the buffs to the ulti, this will not feel as much. Second, and the most important, it stops being an aspect based on critical damage, because before it multiplied the damage to our crits brutally. Now the buff applies to all damage, not only the crit. The buff lasts 60 seconds even if Grizzly Rage ends, so it's much more stable and consistent now. Third, we lowered that cap from 200 to 120%. Yes, we lose that high damage ceiling, I mean high numbers, but now it's easier to activate it, maintain, and more flexible. In summary, we have an aspect much more consistent in damage, but with a slightly lower damage peaks. I think it's that change that it's neither good nor bad. It will not have a very serious impact. But now, the interesting thing that made using Greasy Rage worth it was this aspect, which now we can use without the need to have the ultimate active, so it will make builds like Boulder much better and more flexible to use this season. And this is speaking of the Rabid Bear aspect, which now is called Rabid Beast. Before, this aspect only worked with Greasy Rage and gave us a bonus of 80% more poison damage and converted our direct damage into poison. But of course, it depends 100% on having Greasy Rage. Now always, I mean passively, we have that 80% more poison damage, which does not mean we are poisoning enemies, watch out. There is a big difference between poison damage, which we have a multipliers, and poisoning, which are different things, but we will explain in another video. Also, while we are shapeshifted, our direct damage is converted into poison. Therefore, for me, this is a great change that gives more flexibility and does not depend on the Greasy Rage ultimate, and allows builds like Pulverize plus Petrify or Boulder plus Petrify. In summary, we have an aspect more flexible and more consistent. We have an increase in Lucky Hit from 2% to 6% in Stoneburst, which really is not very relevant. I only think of something like combining Stoneburst with Lightning Storms, like it was a Storm Slide, but I do not see a real and consistent use for this increase. Really, but it's a triple buff, which is acquired a lot anyway. We also have an increase in the passive Earthenmite, not very relevant either, but it's still a good damage addition for the passive. Damage to immobilize enemies increased 50% to 25%. Critical damage increased 50% to 20%. A good buff in summary. Continuing with the Paragon, the only two changes, which are also buffs, are to the nodes Earthen Devastation and Constricting Tendrils. In Earthen Devastation, before we had that Earth skills had 10% increased crit damage, and that number increased by 20% of your bonus damage against controlled enemies, up to max of 60%. Now your Earth skills get 70% increased crit damage flat and permanent. What does this mean? We lose the condition that damage scale against controlled enemies, which is good. It means now we have 70% permanent and constant, which benefits all Earth builds like Pulverize or Boulder. A very good change to the node. Also, we have this change to Constricting Tendrils. Damage goes from 35% to 40%, not much to explain, it's literally 5% more damage. And also from 80% to 1000% more sustained poison damage, I mean for builds that will be dot, which at this moment known is very viable anyway. Still, it is a global buff to this node. To finish with 3 changes, we have the new item made with these changes. Here I want to summarize them in 3 points so it is clear and without lengthening the explanation, since these boots will serve for open world content and speed farming. First, it will be much easier to activate since it works with all nature magic skills. I mean, it will work well for farming with Pulverize or Boulder. Second, the charge system is removed. I mean, we hit and start running like crazy for 8 seconds. Third, we will have insane mobility, maximum speed plus 200. Which turns us into a mobility machine. In conclusion, these boots will help us a lot improve efficiency in farming with builds that were not very fast like Pulverize or Boulder, so it is good to have them for the armor. To close the video, we have these fixes for the following bugs that were affecting the Druid. I would have liked to see the Pulverize bug with certain terrains fixed, but we will see at the game release. These are the corrections. Earthen Bulwark now gives the correct amount of Fortify. Ancestral Fortitude now currently increases non-physical resistances and its shield. Kasim Step Walkers can no longer leave you with permanent speed by mistake. Kasim Step Walkers now show the correct values in their description. And Greasy Rage now currently shows the damage increase when adding additional points to the skill. That has been today's video. Another informative video to be aware of the most important changes made in the game, which are tempering, masterworking, and santification. I hope it also cleared the changes that were made to the Druid for this season, and if not, all doubts can be solved in our Discord and also in the comments of this video. If you like the content, a like will be greatly appreciated. Also, subscribing to the channel will help us continue growing our community. We will see each other in the next video, where I will make my prediction of the best Druid builds for the next season. See you in the Sanctuary.